guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the corner of the office. If you are new here, welcome and thank you for finding us. I hope you enjoy this video. If you do enjoy this video, if you are not subscribed and you could subscribe, that would be a huge help. Obviously, only do it if you're a big fan of Hong Kong cinema. If you love this type of content, if you collect home media, if you love Blu-rays and Blu-ray reviews and stuff like that. But if you do love all of those things and you like this channel, please do sub. It would be a huge help. I want to give a shout out to everyone who has subscribed recently. We set a subscriber goal a couple months ago that we have now sailed past by like 1,000. We have added so many subs this year. It's been amazing. So truly, 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 thank you all so much. And also huge shout out to our patrons who help this channel run. You can go there. You can sign up for $2 a month, $5 a month. All the money we make there goes back into the channel to buy Blu-rays. And sometimes we buy like vintage Hong Kong movie posters and things of that nature. I bought some like rare VHS releases before that we're collecting in this archive that we're trying to build. I do exclusive reviews, wicked early release videos, stuff like that. So let's jump right into this video. It's an exciting day because I'm talking about some of my favorite people ever in the history of cinema. I am talking about John Woo, and not just any John Woo movie, a John Woo movie with Jackie Chan, with Sammo Hung, with Yoon Biu, with Yoon Wah. What am I talking about? What is this mysterious John Woo movie? Hand of Death from 1976. This film is getting a Blu-ray release in Region A from Arrow Films. Hell yes. Arrow is an awesome company. I'm so excited they've been putting out all these martial arts and Hong Kong films recently. It is coming out on May 9th of 2023. This is a fantastic edition. I will be talking about the movie. I will be talking about all the bonus material that you can find on this film. I'm just checking out my notes here to see if there's anything I forgot to mention. This movie is also known as Countdown in Kung Fu. John Woo both wrote and directed this film. It is a Golden Harvest movie, and it stars, in addition to, so Jackie and Sammo are both kind of in supporting roles. Sammo was also the fight/action choreographer for this film. Tao Ling is the lead in the film, and then James Teen is in it. He's the bad guy, and you know he's in like Bruce Lee movies, and you'll recognize him from all kinds of stuff. And then it's got Jackie and Sammo and Yoon Biu and Yoon Wah. So this is kind of like a Three Brothers/Three Dragons movie that came out in 1976 that predates all those other really famous films with those three guys in it. There's Colin Murdoch artwork on this edition from Arrow, and you get a slipcase and the Blu-ray itself, and then there's I believe there's a limited edition poster that comes with it. And then Will Blake did an essay that is in the booklet, and I love Will Blake's writing. And I have said this before on this channel, I'll say it again. He wrote an essay that was in the deluxe edition of, I believe, The Young Master, the Jackie Chan movie. That is one of the best essays I've ever read about Jackie Chan, and one of the best essays I've ever read in a booklet that comes with the Blu-ray. So I highly recommend that you check out his writing. To give you an idea of what this movie is about, it's a pretty simple plot. It's a plot you've seen a lot of times before. It's when the Shaolin Temple is being attacked by the government, because they think that there's a potential for like, you know, an uprising or some kind of seditious act. And so lots of people die, and the remaining Shaolin disciples scatter into the wind, and they go undergrounding and they go into hiding. And one particular Shaolin disciple, who is played by Tao Ling, he's kind of sent by his master. He's sent on a mission of revenge against the bad guy, who's played by James Teen, who went into the Shaolin Temple and massacred all these people. And the James Teen character setup is that he has collected like these 8 bodyguards around himself, who are these amazing masters of martial arts, and they must be defeated before he is defeated. But he has also been training every day nonstop for years, because he knows that someone's going to try to come and assassinate him. So he's this amazing expert martial artist too. It's very much like an old school martial arts film. Non-Shaw Brothers, because it doesn't have that Shaw Brothers thing with like the sets. And this movie was filmed, as I found out from the Frank Zhang and Michael Worth commentary, which I will go into more detail about later, was filmed in Korea and Taiwan. The temple architecture in this movie, I've geeked out about this before on this channel. I did it with Spiritual Kung Fu. I did it with Shaolin Temple, or Shaolin Plot rather. I've done it with some other movies. The temple architecture in this movie is really freaking awesome. There's not a ton of shots of it like there are in some of the other movies that really focus on it, but I have said before, and I will say again, I actually have a coffee table book about Japanese Buddhist temple architecture, and I'm like really into East Asian temple architecture in general, and in particular Buddhist temple architecture, and you know, and then to get more specific than that, Japanese Buddhist temple architecture. But I find all of it really fascinating. My undergraduate degree is in art history, and so I studied, and my primary area of interest was East Asian art, and I was a Japanese minor, so I was kind of like studying Japanese art slash Chinese art slash Korean art a little bit, and so I just love that stuff, and I love to geek out about it. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on this, and then I'm going to talk about the bonus material that's on here, and then I will get out of your hair. This is a very solid, entertaining martial arts film from that period. If you are like me, what you will be doing while you watch this film is you will be playing a game with yourself, trying to figure out, where is John Woo in this movie? How can I tell that this is a John Woo movie? Because as Michael Wirth and Frank Zhang talk about on the commentary track, this was before John Woo had developed what you would consider to be his like kind of mature style that you see in A Better Tomorrow, The Killer, Hard Boiled, all those movies, right? Hard Target, Face Off, like into his American stuff. This is before that style was fully formed, but you can see him trying to find that style in this film. There's an early dolly shot, like tracking shot in this movie that right away made me think of the tea house shootout in Hard Boiled, just the way the camera moves. I was like, oh man, that's so John Woo. But there's a lot of this movie where it just kind of, it's just like a martial arts film of that period. There's a restlessness to the visual design where you can kind of see that he's trying to figure out who he is. And Michael Wirth and Frank Zhang again. So Michael Wirth, you know, he knows all of these people, and he's a martial artist. He's a filmmaker. He's worked as a cinematographer, I believe, a stunt performer. He's an actor. He knows a lot of people who have been in the industry, and he's trained in martial arts with people who have worked in the industry. He interviewed and knows one of the lead actor from this film. I'll talk about that again later when I talk more about the bonus material. But he's talked to a lot of people who know John Woo, who worked with John Woo, and they talk about how John Woo was really trying to find his style with this film and try a bunch of different things and see what worked. And you could see him working against the limitations of the budget. Like there are certain shots where you could see that he wanted a crane movement, but they couldn't afford a crane maybe. So they're doing it handheld, trying to replicate the movements of the crane. But there's a lot of like moving camera. It is visually restless is the best way to put it. Like it's constantly looking for new ways to employ the technical aspects of cinema to tell a story. And I think through that restlessness, there are moments where you see John Woo emerge and you're like, this is definitely a John Woo movie. There's also kind of, you also see early elements of the theme of like the fraternity of, or fraternal relationships rather, and like these bonds of brotherhood that form between these people in these violent, harrowing situations where they're in life or death struggles. And that's very John Woo, but it doesn't have the same feel, the way that it's explored in this film as you would see in his later films. But you see the germ of the idea there. The other thing I really noticed with this film is a major influence from Kurosawa. And it was interesting because I noticed that while I was watching it, and then Frank and Michael Wirth talk about it as well. Michael Wirth points out, for instance, there are scenes where the camera is pointed straight at the sun. And if you know anything about Kurosawa, you'll know that he's very, very famous for having done that in Rashomon. And a lot of filmmakers, like Robert Altman is one who comes to mind right away, have talked about how influential it was for them to see Rashomon, to see the camera pointed straight at the sun like that, to see all of these dollying shots going through the woods and stuff like that, the camera movement, the techniques that Kurosawa was using, the boldness of his vision. What I saw right away was The Hidden Fortress. So this is a film about these Shaolin guys who have gone underground, and the bad guys, if you want to call them that, have kind of they're in control of everything, and the Shaolin guys are moving through enemy territory essentially. And there's like checkpoints they have to get through, and they have to sneak past people and pretend that they're someone else and hope they don't get caught. This is very Hidden Fortress, which if you're unfamiliar, Hidden Fortress, it's a Kurosawa film that came out in 1958 and is often talked about because it was a big influence on George Lucas when he made Star Wars. And the plot is that this princess kind of has to go on the run, go into hiding. And then the Mifune character is kind of like her protector. And so the two of them kind of are go into hiding together. And people are coming after them, and they have to get through these checkpoints. It's a very similar setup. And there are certain scenes in this movie that really reminded me of The Hidden Fortress. I also saw some Seven Samurai references. In the second half of the film, you have this device where the Tao Ling character is putting together like a band of martial artists who are going to go after the bad guys. It's very Seven Samurai, the way they kind of find the members of the gang and they start putting them together. And there's even a scene where they're talking about their plan, and they're using kind of physical objects to be like, this will be here, this will be here. The forensic nature of that scene and the way they use physical objects to represent ideas is total Seven Samurai. Kurosawa was a very forensic filmmaker, by which I mean he was very attentive to every single detail of a process. So in Seven Samurai, there are these extensive scenes of like, there's the scene where Takashi Shimura, I think, or a couple of the characters are just walking around the village that they're protecting, looking at everything. Like, okay, there's a bridge. We're going to have to block the bridge if the bandits come in that way. Okay, here's a field that could potentially come through the field. It's very forensic. And they even draw things out on a little map, and they create physical representations of these ideas of how to defend the village. And that kind of, you see like the same thing in this film, which is really cool. Something else I wrote down that's worth noting as I was talking, you know, before I mentioned you kind of play this game with yourself where you're like, where is John Woo in this film? I forgot to mention when I was talking about that. There is a character in this movie. His name is the Swordsman. I'm going to try not to spoil anything for you here. This might be like a smidge of a spoiler. I don't really think it is. His character really reminded me of Mark Gore from A Better Tomorrow, the arc of his character. When you meet him, he's kind of this like wandering, sort of drunken, disheveled guy, but he's got a sword. And he kind of holds himself like a badass, but he seems a little bit broken. And then you learn his backstory, and you learn where he's come from, and you see where he's going. And that trajectory really made me think of Mark Gore. So I did see like a smidgen of future John Woo, thinking of A Better Tomorrow, and that. So let's talk about the bonus material that's on here. There's a 23-minute documentary about John Woo that includes extensive interviews with John Woo. Chow Yun-fat is interviewed in it. It's really, really cool. This is an archival feature, so this has been released in the past. But John Woo talks about how he does action scenes, like how he conceives of them, how it's important for him that they're very organic, that they arise from the action of the film and from the motivations of the character and who the characters really are, rather than just coming up with insane ideas and shoving them into a movie and building stuff around them. He wants everything to work organically as a whole piece. He's not deliberately trying to entertain the audience. He's just trying to find scenes that work within the material he's working with. And he also, he talks about his love of musicals and how a lot of his framing is inspired by musicals. And there are sections of this film with the moving camera, the handheld, the energy of it, that you can kind of see that. And it is interesting that like the choreography in a musical is it's very highly choreographed, and it's very specific movements, and it has to be coordinated with the movements of the camera and all this stuff in much the same way that fight scenes are done in martial arts films. So it is really interesting to think about John Woo is doing this movie with these coordinated fight scenes, and he loves musicals and Melville and stuff like that, which is, so what is he thinking of when he's trying to coordinate all of this action coming from a perspective of being inspired by musicals? I just think that's really interesting. It's interesting to think about. There's also a section where they draw parallels between this movie and The Killer and some of his later work. So that'll be interesting, I think, for people who are big fans of those other films. There's a sorry, I keep saying his name wrong. Tao Ling, 30-minute long. Well, it's like I think the interview is about 25 minutes because there's a 5-minute preference to the interview with Michael Wirth. So this is a fascinating piece of history. This, I believe, has never been seen outside of people who've been shown it personally by Michael Wirth, because he recorded it himself on, I think, VHS in the 90s. So Michael Wirth is a huge fan of Tao Ling. And he used to go and see his movies as a kid when he was training in martial arts. And he talks about how when he would see movies with certain performers in them where he was just blown away by their martial arts style, he would go see the movie again, sneak his Super 8 camera into the theater, film the movie, get the film developed, watch it, and try to learn their moves. And Tao Ling was one of those people where he would record his movies and try to replicate his martial arts moves. And then when he was in his 20s and he had started working in the industry and he was training a lot in martial arts, I think he was able to meet Tao Ling, and he did this interview with him. And it's a really cool interview because it's a huge fan of this guy who loves martial arts, who is a practitioner of martial arts, who loves movies and knows a lot about his movies. But as Michael Wirth says in the intro to the interview, he had only read a couple articles about him or interviews or something in these Hong Kong magazines. He knew very little about him as a person. So he's asking him questions and learning all of these things about him. And Tao Ling is like very chill and just kind of like, talking about his life and like explaining his style. And it's really kind of this incredible thing because it's like sitting in on someone meeting one of their idols and geeking out and being so excited, and there's so much reverence and respect in it, and it's just a really cool document and like a little piece of history. I'm really happy that that's on here. There's a Sammo Hung interview that's about 6 minutes long. He talks about entering the business, wanting to be a stuntman, what it was like to work with John Woo. He talks about how he had known John Woo for a while before they made this movie, and so they had a good relationship and how they worked together and all that kind of stuff. And he talks about Jackie Chan. Jackie actually has 2 fight scenes in this movie. So whereas in some films, from the early in the 70s, you see Jackie just like in bit parts, or he's like one of the the henchmen, or like Yoon Bi-yu, like I said, is in this film, but he plays a bunch of different. Sometimes he's like a good guy henchman, sometimes he's a bad guy henchman. He's just kind of like around performing in fight scenes. Jackie has like 2 really solid fight scenes in this movie. And so Sammo talks about how easy it is to work with Jackie. They have the same training. They know each other so well. They've been friends since childhood and all that kind of stuff. So Michael Worth and Frank Chang, I've already talked a lot about what they say in this commentary track. I love these 2 together. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again, it's because Frank knows so much about the culture. He speaks the language. He knows all the history of the films. He's worked in the industry, the distribution side of it, and for film festivals and stuff like that. And he knows so much about the people in the films and their lives, and he has so much cultural insight and a really good, insightful analysis of the film as well. And then Michael Worth, being a filmmaker and being a martial artist and being an actor, a stunt performer, a cinematographer, and all this stuff, Michael Worth is able to really insightfully break down the techniques that they're using in the filmmaking, and also the martial arts that they're using. And one thing that like there's a scene in this where he's talking about the locking techniques they're using within the martial arts. I wouldn't even know what that is. I mean, I've heard it before, but I don't really know what it means. So to have him on this commentary track being like, they're using this technique here, and like in an early fight scene, he's like, they're mixing northern and southern styles here. So it's not like, it's not really realistic in terms of they would actually be doing that, but it looks cool, or like stuff like that I would know absolutely nothing about, would have no insight into. It's really great to hear him talk about that kind of stuff. A story that Michael Worth tells, and I don't want to tell you everything that's on this commentary track because I want you to go and listen to it for yourself. There's a really cool story that Michael Worth tells where he talks about how John Woo really wanted to make his version of Le Samurai, which is a French New Wave movie that he absolutely loves. And Raymond Wong was like, no, you got to make like basically like a skin flick or a martial arts movie. Like, we don't want anything else. And so John Woo was like, okay, I'll make a martial arts movie. But that's A Better Tomorrow and The Killer, especially those 2 films, are really, really heavily inspired by the French New Wave. So it's really interesting for me to think about, like, if Raymond Wong had said yes, would he have made a Better Tomorrow-esque film in the 1970s? And then maybe that wouldn't have done well, right? Because of the climate at the time. It's just so interesting to think about how history could have turned out differently. Frank talks about what the original language title of this is, and then they kind of analyze, like I said, where you see John Woo in this and where you see his style developing. And then actually something else that's really interesting that Michael Worth talks about is that apparently Sammo Hung was very helpful on the set of this film because he had more experience, I think, than John Woo with martial arts fighting scenes. And I know that John Woo was like an apprentice of Chang Che, and he was like his disciple or whatever, and he worked a lot with him, and he was on the set of Shaw Brothers films and stuff like that. But apparently Sammo was very helpful in helping John Woo choreograph some of the scenes in terms of the camera work and stuff like that. So it's an interesting little anecdote that Michael Worth tells. So it is the Hand of Death release from Arrow Films for Region A. May 9th of 2023 is when this is coming out. Film was originally released in 1976. If you're a fan of John Woo and you haven't seen this film, I'd never seen this movie before, and I'm a big fan of John Woo, so it's like essential viewing for me, right? It's Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung in a John Woo movie. Like, you have to see it. You just have to if you're like a big fan of these films. And it's not the best movie ever made. It's not this revelatory viewing experience, but it is a really solid, very fun, old school martial arts movie where you get to play this really interesting game with yourself, spot the John Woo. It's like, where's Waldo? Where is John Woo in this film? It was a really incredible, fascinating watch for me. I'm really excited this release has come out. This is out in Region B from Eureka. It's on a 2-pack with another old John Woo film. Or not older, but like from that era. So there you go. So my name is Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciations. The Last Hurrah for Chivalry, excuse me, is the other film in that Eureka 2-pack. And Last Hurrah for Chivalry has been released in Region A by Criterion. So you can get that as well. So my name is Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. As always, I thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.